Men and true, out to win glory for themselves and their countries. Canada's Daly struggles mightily to lift some 250 pounds, the medium heavy's goal. Missed by that much. Good try. Russia's Arkady Vorobiev presses 290 pounds, a new medium heavyweight mark, good for the championship and the points to give Russia the team crown. Here's a heavyweight in action. Want to try it? That's where the glamour of the sport is. Heavyweights. Korean war vet Jim Bradford of Washington, D.C. earns the #2 spot, lifting some 1,047 pounds in 3 events. Now meet 22-year-old Paul Anderson, student of Toccoa, Georgia. A big man on campus, no doubt. A fantastic total of 1,030 pounds, 410 in the press alone for the World's Championship. Quite a boy, that Paul Anderson.
By now, the world press was paying close attention to the young man being labeled as the strongest man in the world, bringing news movie footage to theaters all over the country, where Americans sat spellbound as they watched the huge Georgian break record after record. It was images like these of Paul Anderson strutting onto the stage with legs and arms so huge that he had to waddle to the weights that left such a lasting memory in the minds of many people like Herb Glossbrenner. In Baghdad, he set yet another world's record by continental clean and jerk in 457.5 pounds. Bettering the old record by 20 pounds and 6.5 pounds better than the old two hands any manner record of 451 pounds that had stood for 55 years, a record set by Arthur Saxton in 1900. Once back in the States, the dismantling of world records continued, like in June of 1956 in Philadelphia, where he exceeded 3 more world records, pressing 400 pounds, snatching 335 pounds, clean and jerking 440 pounds for a new world record total of 1,175 pounds. He was most likely the first man in history to have clean and jerked 440 pounds, but the stage was overrun with spectators before the weights could be officially weighed. Though all conditions were met for official world records, Paul's records were never submitted to the International Weightlifting Federation for official recognition. According to Herb Glossbrenner, and I quote, "It was a most inexcusable act of negligence and disregard for this athlete, as Paul's records were never submitted." Many believe this was by far the greatest singular performance of Paul's amateur career.
The nation's strongmen draw a small throng to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia for the National Senior Weightlifting Championships. It's hard work. Another contender tries and barely gets it off the floor. It's risky work, too. Chuck Vinci of York, Pennsylvania, defending title holder in the bantamweight class, lifted a combined total of 690 pounds in the 3 events to retain his crown. 4th place in the bantam bruisers went to Dave Moyer of Reading, PA. Dave's been doing this for some time. That's a lot of load for anybody's knees to support. Here's a mountain of a man, Paul Anderson of Georgia, who thinks nothing of lifting over a half a ton in a meet. 440 pounds in the clean and jerk for a meet total of 1,175 pounds. Paul weighs 320 himself. 2 new world records for Paul Anderson of Toccoa, Georgia. What a man!
By October of 1956, Paul found himself in San Jose, California at the Olympic tryouts, easily winning a seat on the plane leaving for Melbourne, Australia, where the 1956 Olympic Games were to be played. The Russians were so sure he'd win, they did not even enter their heavyweight to compete. But what they and the others did not know was that Paul had become terribly sick and was running a temperature of 104 degrees. At According to his own accounts in his autobiography, he began taking 4 aspirin every 3 hours without the attending physician's knowledge, was able to bring his temperature down enough that the doctors allowed him to enter the competition. Despite having lost some 40 pounds and being off balance from the sickness, Paul brought a gold medal back to the United States. Paul Anderson is the last American heavyweight lifter to ever win a gold medal in the Olympic Games for the United States. December of 1956, the team returned to the Los Angeles International Airport, where Paul and the rest of the team emerged all smiles. For Paul Anderson, this would be the last time he'd speak to a large gathering as an amateur athlete.
The first members of America's Olympic team arrive in exuberant return home. Gold medalist weightlifters Anderson and Vinci gagging up, the lightweight on top. Oarsman Jack Kelly lost as Russia swept the point scores. But in basketball, Big Bill Russell starred. Weightlifting, heavyweight Paul Anderson led the U.S. contingent. And in track and field, America dominated with 32 gold medals in all. Among the winners, Glenn Davis and Greg Bell. Tom Courtney, Charlie Dumas, Bob Richards. Barry O'Brien greeted by his family. Fine sportsmen all, win or lose.
Not long after returning home from the Olympics, Paul turned professional, accepting an offer to appear on the Ed Sullivan Show. Reflecting back on his decision, Paul stated in his autobiography, and I quote, "These ventures altered my status from amateur to professional, which opened many doors for me to pursue fame and fortune as one of history's best-known professional strongmen. It was good to be free of the restrictions, and I had no more amateur ambitions anyway. There was no sense in preparing for the 1960 Olympics if it meant 4 years of poverty." After only 4 years of competitive lifting, including the disastrous year of 1954, where Paul was plagued with injuries, the young man had established a phenomenal 18 American and 9 world records. As an amateur, he retired as world, Olympic, and twice USA national champion. As a professional, he tried his hands at wrestling, boxing, and even the movies, but he never felt comfortable with any of these ventures. As a professional lifter, he continued lifting phenomenal poundages far in excess of any human on Earth. In June of 1957, for example, he lifted 6,270 pounds in a back lift, a feat that many believe will never be equaled, and a feat that bettered the old record by more than 1,600 pounds. Also in 1957, he performed a tremendous show of strength during a strongman act in Vegas, where he squatted 2 steel safes filled with 15,000 silver dollars with a combined weight of 1,160 pounds. Again, some 35 years later, no one has been able to equal the lift. And this was not performed once, but an act he did 3 times a night. on famed Muscle Beach in Santa Monica, California, in front of knowledgeable witnesses, Paul snatched over 540 pounds from a squat rack on the beach, lifting the weights overhead with little difficulty. Witnesses stated, and I quote, "This was the greatest feat of strength most of us had ever seen." Noted publisher Bob Heiss witnessed Paul perform a one-arm side press, which weighed 380 pounds. I quote from Mr. Heiss's own statement, "I saw Paul do a one-arm side press with an enormous barbell which weighed 172.4 kilograms, 380 pounds. He continues, "This is the most weight legitimately lifted with one arm from the shoulders overhead. This exceeds even the unofficial bent press record of old-time professional strongmen." In this footage, Paul does 300 pounds twice, and during another appearance, he does 240 pounds twice.
Here the world's strongest man is lifting a 300-pound dumbbell, not just one time, but twice.
Whereas Louis Cyr gained world renown by hoisting the 208-pound Cyr bell once over his head, Anderson raised a 240-pound weight over his head several times. He then showed the...
We could go on and on reciting these lifts and stack article upon article atop one another, or quote multitudes of lifters and riders. But something we have not looked at so far that deserves discussion is the times and manner in which these lifts were performed. The time of his amateur career was 1952 through 56. Knowledgeable experts will quickly point out to those who question whether or not steroids could have been used by Anderson that steroids were not even available to U.S. athletes during the 50s. In addition to steroids and other muscle and endurance enhancing drugs, modern science has brought to the lifter and other sports figures new information on diet and general health that 30 or even 15 years ago would have been described as totally revolutionary. Add to this the everyday use of high-speed cameras that have been coupled to computers that break down an athlete's movements into their smallest details, enabling minute adjustments never thought possible. There is no doubt that the young boy from Toccoa was totally void of such equipment and help. Not only did he not have access to such equipment, but he never even had an officially trained coach. Sure, he received some sporadic tips from some of the old-time lifters like Bob Peoples, but these encounters are best described as brief, with Paul doing the majority of his training in private within the confines of his parents' house located in Elizabethton, Tennessee, and later Toccoa, Georgia. While training during the early days and even right up to his appearance in Melbourne, Australia for the Olympic Games, Paul followed a routine that he had personally developed, using homemade weights that many times came from the junkyard. One of the most famous pictures depicting Paul's equipment were those showing him working out with a set of iron wheels attached to a huge steel bar which he used in practicing his squats. Most on earth could not even squat down with the tremendous wheels once, but Paul squatted with the wheels on a daily basis over and over again, working with his huge 36-inch thighs. Other homemade weights show up in his old 1955 film footage taken during one of his daily workouts, such as these huge 55-gallon steel drums filled with concrete, and weights suspended from a tree in the backyard with the use of chains. After witnessing his lifts personally or later on film, many describe Paul Anderson as just pure brute strength. Not only must we take into account the manner in which he threw the weights around, but we must look at the manner in which he prepared for these lifts and the supportive equipment he failed to take advantage of. Lifting experts cringe and shake their heads in amazement when they look at old photos and footage of Paul walking on stage and without any warm-up squat world record weight, wearing an old pair of tennis shoes, or worse yet, no shoes at all, and no knee wraps. In many photos, Paul was shown wearing street clothes and dress